says, "Sing a new song to the Lord. Sing it everywhere around the world.
Sing out his praises, bless his name. Each day tell someone that he saves.
Publish his glorious acts throughout the earth. Tell everyone about the amazing things he does. For the Lord is great beyond description and greatly to be praised. Worship only him among the gods. For the gods of other nations are merely idols, but our God made the heavens. Honor and majesty surround him. Strength and beauty are his temple." And if you'd stand as you're able, let's join together and sing, "Here I Am, Lord." Thank you. You kids want to come down? Kids from 8 to 80. Little ones, big ones, I don't care. bring these guys down.
Nobody? You got one.
Okay, where'd you go?
She's in her mom up here. Why don't you just sit here?
Okay, and then we won't let her.
Here.
Oh.
Just sit.
Okay, don't force her.
Come here.
They're not gonna hurt you. They're just cousins.
Here you go. You've met these guys, but we will do a, why don't we bring them in the middle so everybody can see them? Come on. Get up. The normal position of a Newfoundland dog is laying down. So when they aren't doing something else, they lay down. And usually they like it when it's cold concrete. They don't like the heat one bit. These are Newfoundland dogs. And if you live in Newfoundland, it's, oh, you got the Newfoundland dog. So we've learned to pronounce it right. It's Newfoundland. Newfoundland. It's not Newfoundland.
And you're an official Newfoundland.
That's right. I got screeched in. Does anybody know about that? When you go to Newfoundland, what you do is become an official Newfoundlander by drinking something called screech, which is the bottom of the barrel of a rum. Okay? And it's a little like bunker fuel, not that I'm an expert on bunker fuel. I got screeched in on a boat that was going to see puffins. And he said, "You been screeched in yet?" And I go, "No." Because they've got kind of an Irish thing going up there. So what you do is you drink a shot of this screech, and then you have to kiss a cod. You really gotta want it. He happened to have a plastic cod. He picked out the people that he liked, and we always make it a habit, which is a good habit, by the way. Don't talk to your fellow guests. Talk to the crew, talk to the folks, and find out about him.
So
And this guy,
he actually took you down.
yes, well, he went down,
Yeah,
down the hole,
and got it.
because he kept a special bottle of screech. And I wouldn't recommend that as a steady diet, and wouldn't have any stomach left. So I got screeched in. We went up to Newfoundland 3 times, and we're bred in Newfoundland as relatives of the Norwegian black bear dog. We like the legend, and no one's quite sure about the origin, so we picked one we like, and this one is the Viking connection. His registered name is Winddancer's Nordic Legend, so we call him Odin, after Odin, the god.
We went up to Newfoundland to see, anybody ever heard of Lonzo Meadow? No? Lonzo Meadow is a national historic, it's international, UNESCO recognized it as where the Vikings landed in St. Anthony's, which is the very tippity north piece of Newfoundland. It's also a location of church world services, where the Methodist Church does take part in that, and they contribute money up there. We're talking remote.
Very, very remote.
Yeah.
And these people, they don't got it, they live without it,
Yeah.
and they're tough.
You buy gasoline in a gas bar. There's no casings. What it is a fuel tank in the back of the guy's house, and you go in and hand crank it.
But they needed a dog up there that could handle the cold water, because most Newfoundlanders don't swim, because the water's so darn cold that get in there and they die of hypothermia. Newfoundland people, as remember 9/11, Gander Airport took all those planes that were grounded, and villagers all helped them out. They passengers. As a matter of fact, they did a movie about it. You really have to want to go there, but I really recommend it. It's a cool place, and these people are very nice, and they bred these dogs, and from these dogs also came a Labrador Retriever. Labs have Newfie genes because these dogs don't hunt. They make friends with stuff, and that isn't what you want in a hunting dog. But they've got great noses, so they took a Newfie and crossed it with a hunting breed they had up there, and they got the Labrador Retriever who can spend all his time in the water, just like these, because they're life-saving dogs. They've got a lifeguard program running around here. Some are better than others.
And if you take your motorhome with you, you can go to St. Barb, and they will actually crane your motorhome onto a freighter and take it across to Quebec, to Long. and then from there you drive up to Red Bay in Labrador, and you stop along the towns there. It's
Yeah,
really a
we-
cool trip. Yeah, we did 2 trips up there in the motorhome. And
Yeah,
one
well, we're
was-
not doing the
yeah,
travel.
And one was the transatlantic crossing, that's how we got to St. John's, and she got switched. I didn't get switched, they didn't want me.
As a matter of fact, I got invited to a pub, but we couldn't because we were on a cruise, which is too bad. I think I would have enjoyed it. But at any rate, the Newfoundland breed came from there, and since then, they're not a popular breed because they're messy. I just picked this up off the floor up there, and that's only 2 seconds worth. We have piles, and the house, you know, we have a beam vacuum cleaner, and they also drool, and when they shake their head, they can launch it 25 feet. And I did an ode to drool. It was the blood on the saddle. It said, drool on the ceiling, drool on the floor. A big sling of drool is on the back door. I looked for the culprit, I followed the trail. There was my Newfie with drool on his tail. And that was when I was cleaning, you know, so Mr. Clean Sponge and this, and praying for gypsies to come. One dog like this. They are wonderful. We take them to 11 nursing homes a month when the nursing homes are open, and this one in particular, Ranger, has dementia and Alzheimer's patients. He'll spend all day with somebody like that, and he seems to know who needs him. He's very intuitive. They're very quiet and very gentle, and if you've been in nursing homes, the residents don't like jumpy. They don't like lots of noise, and you know, any of that.
And he knows how to lick people too.
Oh, and then there's one fellow in one of the nursing homes who had a stroke. And when you visit nursing homes, you get very used to seeing just about anything. And this guy was in his wheelchair, he was like this, with his tongue hanging out. And I knew who he was, you know, we'd seen him before. So what does he do? Ranger walks up to him and starts licking his tongue. Right, so then the guy starts licking him back. So you have the 2 of them, and I'm looking for the health department. This has to stop, this is terrible. But then the fella sat up and started petting him and talking to him. We've seen this time and time and time again. And Bob and I feel that God gave us these dogs. And we tell people that it's a perfect platform for evangelization. They say, what do you mean God gave them to you? Well, when God gives a gift, He expects it to be used. And anytime we've taken these guys any place, it's turned out to be wonderful, which is God. And not only for whoever is receiving all this dog world, but us and the dog.
If you multiply the 11 nursing homes in months times the years we've been doing it, the amount of people that are in nursing homes, Odin being the oldest one, he's been touched by, we get in excess of 20,000 people.
So people say, oh, he's so gentle. Yeah. We did have one old lady though, boy, I don't care how sick she
Well,
was.
when we lived in Florida, not with these 2 dogs, but with the other ones that we had a lady there who did not speak English, she spoke Spanish, and her job was to run around in a wheelchair and pick him.
It was a
Yeah, that's right, it was, yeah. And
She
just
kicked
pick
it.
him all the
Every chance
time.
she got.
He never reacted to it.
So we kept, you know, moving around, hopefully, you know,
And she
throwing
kept
chairs in
following.
her way. She wasn't a nice lady, and I don't care if she was sick. That was not a nice thing. Trying to think, our life revolves around them. We retired, and one thing, retired people, and you probably raise your hand if you said this. If I only had time, right? Well, we had time. And this lady, you can tell the story about the lady down in Hannibal.
Which,
The one that got us going on all this.
oh yeah, I was working for Western Catholic Union in Quincy, Illinois. And that's obviously a Catholic fraternal, kind of like Knights of Columbus, okay? And she had mentioned, have you ever brought your dogs anywhere? And we said, no. She said, why don't you bring them up to the WCU apartments? WCU used to have apartments at 8th and Broadway before we sold them in 1994. And we went there for a Christmas party, and we had a really great time, people like dogs and all that kind of stuff. So we decided to maybe try it in a nursing home. We used to preach at Sunset Home. Yeah.
Do I dare tell that story?
Yeah, you can tell it. We used to preach once a month, we did that for about 3 years. And she's got this one.
Well, I used to bring my guitar, and there would be a little group of people on Wednesday evenings. And real nice people, you know, most people in nursing homes are not nuts, you know, or have mental problems. It's usually their bodies, but not their mental capacity at all. But they have no filters. And they will say whatever they want, and they do. So I'm there at the end, you know, nice service. Hallelujah, hallelujah. And it was pretty. And this gal in the back goes, hallelujah, hallelujah. And the one up front turns around and says, Vilma, shut the hell up. And of course, this is in the middle of a church service. And I was on the floor, absolutely on the floor. So that has nothing to do with the dogs. The dogs they're wonderful with kids. The books all say that if your Newfie does not love children, get rid of it. There's something wrong with it. They're peaceful, they're quiet, they're laid back. They, if you can put up with the hair in the drool and the expense, because they're not cheap, either to acquire or the shots. He weighs
87.
187 and he's 168. I think he doesn't weigh 187 because he's been on the diet. And dogs don't get fat on their own. Right, that's me. So he's been on short rations and he's been okay with it, but I think he's down to maybe 180 now, which is good. And he's an old boy, he's 9. They only live 8 to 10 years. We're hoping he defies the odds, because I don't know what to do without him. They give a purpose and a usefulness to our life that is beyond compare. Not only out in the community, but in the churches. They've been in 13 Methodist churches.
Yeah, Illinois and everything else,
Yeah.
probably in 20 churches. Yeah.
And they have a,
They did the Camp Order.
well, maybe I showed you this last time, but this guy has a shallow pit. And all Newfies have what's known, and who had a St. Bernard? There were 2 people here that had St. They had a roll to them. Working dogs tend to. And they have the Newfie swagger. And it's kind of like this. All right. They ain't got him. I can show it. All right, get up.
He's quiet.
Just watch this over here. I'll bring him down here.
You got the Marilyn Monroe one.
He does. So he orthopedically is a mess.
Plus he is defective.
Right, he would be disqualified.
If you could bring him into a ring, they would disqualify him. Because he has,
Unless they cut it out. Oh, there it is.
right there.
See the little black hairs?
5 or 6 black hairs. That's instantly disqualified.
They're supposed to have a pure white tip on the tail, and between the tip, he's a mess.
And he's like a rule on his head.
So the lesson there is, oh, and there's a book, there's a standard, the AKC standard, that tells about perfect dogs, the perfect standard. So I used to tell the kids, isn't it nice God doesn't have a book? You know, to say, you're not acceptable because you're not perfect. And of course we do have a book, and it's the Bible. And you'll not find that in anywhere. What it says is, reach for perfection. Doesn't say you're going to be perfect. Because nobody was, except Jesus. And these dogs are, like I said, I don't know what we do without them. There'll come a day where we can't handle them. Because he wants to go to point B, he's going. You know, and I'm a little old lady. I'm 74 years old, and he can drag me from here to wherever. Marceline, with no problem at all.
In dog trials, they do drafting, and the winner wins. And the weight total is 11,900 pounds.
One dog.
One dog.
So they are contained.
11,900 pounds, they sure can move you.
So they, you know, we just think it's a wonderful breed, and if you have a kid in a swimming pool, this is the one you want. Because they can swim all day long, and better swimmers than a lot of Olympic swimmers. They don't do a dog paddle, they do a breaststroke. They use that pail as a rudder. They can swim in circles, they can hold their breath. And if they're attacked in water by anything, they do this. They straddle whatever it is and hold it underwater until it drowns. Our dogs are playing and did that and thought it was very amusing. We thought it was horrible. Yeah, we're taking
Let's go. Let's go. I'm down.
If you have any questions,
Oh.
ask me after.
How much food do they eat a day?
It was about 100 pounds a month,
Huh?
about 100 pounds a month, and about 2 to 3 gallons of water a day.
And if you do ever buy one, make sure it's a good one. Don't get a defective Newfoundland. Here. All right, let's see, where are we? Oh, can you stand again for how great thou art? These are mine, where's yours? Yours is not here. Right here.
Oh, you got that. Our scripture reading this morning is Genesis 1 and 2 and Colossians 1:16. When God began creating the heavens and earth, the earth was at first a shapeless, chaotic mass with the Spirit of God brooding over its dark vapors. And in Colossians, for him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether throne or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. This morning, when we take a look at the dogs and what they do, we take a look at what people do, and we take a look at what God wants. Please pray for me here. Lord, may the words of our mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our blessed Redeemer. God brings order out of chaos, whether you know it or not. God is in charge, whether you acknowledge it or not. The order he has established will be in existence until he doesn't want it to be that way anymore. The scripture in Genesis tells us the creation story of God bringing order out of chaos, and the scripture in Colossians states clearly that all things were created by God through Jesus Christ and for Jesus Christ. All things on earth and in the heavens, thrones, powers, rulers, authorities, animals, flowers, air, sun, people, vegetation, all things. It all has a purpose, and that purpose is for Jesus on earth. And it is God who is in charge, not us. God created all, and he loves his creation. Where we live, in New London, Missouri, Sue didn't mention that earlier, we live right off of 61, and we live up on a bluff. How high is the bluff up? Well, if I took you to the edge of where my grass ends, and you take one step out, it's 125 feet straight down. And I don't get too close to the edge, okay? Last summer, we heard the roar of an airplane coming over a treetop level, and everybody here probably knows it was a crop duster. Scared us to death. Scared him, the black one, so bad, he peed all the way to the door, ran into the house, hopped up on the bed, which he's never done in his life, and buried his head under the pillow. Okay? So he dropped down and he started dusting the crops. Last year we had a very good result. The year before, the field was planted and we had a huge rain, and a good portion of the field was submerged in water. When the flood of '93 occurred, the Salt River flows through that area, and you could ride a boat on top of that field. It was a giant lake. So it is flood territory, okay? That field was submerged in water for days. And when it finally dried out, the farmer went and replanted it. That night, it rained again. And that field flooded again. And a few days later, it dried out, and the farmer did what? Replanted it again. And you know what? It was a great harvest that fall. This year, the farmer planted on time, came up, but guess what? Parts of it were wet, parts of it had to be replanted, and he went out and he replanted it. And guess what? It rained again, and he went out and he planted it again. From the past experience, that farmer knew that if you plant a seed, it will grow. Doesn't mean he won't complain about too much rain or not enough rain or hail or insects and other numerous things that can happen. But he knows that the seed will grow. Seeds look dead until they're planted, but we know that they will grow. It's God's creation.
I think farmers are among the most faithful people on earth. Each year they put all on the line and trust the Lord to bring in the crop. It is God that created the seeds, not man. Sure, we have tinkered, engineered, and enhanced it, but after all, they're God's seeds. But if I told everybody in this room to go into a lab and make a seed, nobody here can do it. Nobody can physically make a seed, all right? Also, you couldn't create the stars. You couldn't create the planet. Wheat or corn or any of the animals from scratch, you could not do it. It is God who is in charge, not us. God is everywhere. This spring, before the field was planted, I was sitting out on the back deck and I could see down, maybe the field is maybe not quite a half mile across, and there was something in the field. So I went inside and got the binoculars, and for the first time, there was a bald eagle. I see him flying by, but never down in the field. And the male bald eagle was eating something. And he had a party around him. He had about 10 to 12 turkey vultures sitting about from here to the door back, watching him eat. And not one of those vultures would move 1 foot closer. And then he sat there for 4 hours, munching away on whatever it was. I couldn't figure it out. And mother vulture shows up, mother eagle shows up. She's bigger than the males, in case you didn't know that. The females are larger than the males. They do have a 6-foot wingspan, and then the vultures were flying over the top. And then they went back to the ground. And by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, nobody in the entire day would even move a foot towards closer to that eagle. And then she flew off, and he flew off, and they finished off whatever was left down there. God made it that way. The eagles didn't make it that way. God himself went ahead and figured out that eagles are the best hunters there, and you don't want to mess with them. And those vultures would not come near them, all right? God is everywhere. He shouts his presence in ways that are great and small, if you have the eyes to see it. Here are some fun facts about God's creation and how he brings order and how accurate he is. In hatching eggs, again, I'm not a farmer. I saw this and I made use of it. The eggs of a potato bug hatch in 7 days. The eggs of canaries hatch in 14. Those of barnyard hens hatch in 21. Eggs of ducks and geese in 28. Those of a mallard in 35. Parrots and ostrich eggs in 42 days. All of these are divisible by 7. The number of days the Bible said it took God to create the world. God is organized. Elephants are the only mammal whose rear legs bend backwards like ours. They have rear knees. They are so big and so heavy that they need their rear legs to be like that so they're able to get up easily. Horses rise from the ground on their front 2 legs. A cow rises from the ground from its hind legs first. It's easier for them. How God arranged sections of segments and fruits and grains. Each watermelon, has anybody here ever counted the stripes on a watermelon? No? Count them. They're all even. Every watermelon has an even number of stripes. Orange has an even number of segments. Corn has an even number of rows. Stalks of wheat have an even number of grains. Every bunch of bananas has its lowest row an even number of bananas, and each row decreases by 1 so that one row has an even and the next one has an odd. We lived in Florida for 3 years. On Wednesday nights when Sue was in choir, I would have my bicycle, which I kept at the church because we lived about a 40-minute drive away, and I'd go out and drive on my bicycle around Naples. And every Wednesday night, I'd make it a trip to go down to the Gulf of Mexico and watch the waves come in. Nice, peaceful location. If you take a look at the waves rolling in from the sea, they're 26 to the minute. Doesn't matter whether it's a calm night or a windy night. Same 26 waves every single minute. All grains are found in even number on the stalk, and the Lord specified 30-fold, 60-fold, and 100-fold, which are all even numbers. These are the kind of things that are out there to be seen. God is everywhere, and his creation is accurate, logical, precise, and has a reason. This one really, really got me. We put cracked corn down for animals, for the deer in the winter and stuff like that. But we put cracked corn out, and on a particularly warm day, guess what showed up? In February. Honeybees. Honeybees were rolling around in the dust from the cracked corn. They literally coated themselves with it. We'd never seen that before, and did a little research and found that sometimes in late winter, before flowers are blooming and pollen-rich vegetables are being grown, the honeybees will come out of the hive and search for some kind of food. And they roll around in the corn dust. And they bring the corn dust back to the hive so that they have food to eat. Okay? Kind of like a cascade. I like that word, cascade. It further moves on. Take a look at Niagara Falls. That's a giant cascade. Take a look at the waterfall in Yellowstone National Park. It's pure, beautiful, okay? It just cascades down, okay? Put the corn out, the bees took it to the hive, the bees survived to pollinate our plants, and we need that to survive. A good cascade. God knows what he's doing. We need to trust him to do that as he has done in the past. We need to see him in everything. By concentrating on God first and our eyes are open to see his creation, it will allow him to put us where we fit in his plan.
Take them down. One of the most exciting things that's happened in the last half century or so has been a discovery of trophic cascades. Bob was talking about cascades. And what the definition is a trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example of this is what's happened out at Yellowstone National Park. When they reintroduced wolves, and tuck this in your mind when you get home, is Google how wolves change rivers. We all know wolves will kill other animals, but we aren't really aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves were there, what had happened is, because they weren't there for 70 years, the deer and elk had multiplied to the point, because there was nothing to hunt them, and they went ahead, even despite the effort of human beings to control the population, they'd managed to graze away most of the vegetation where they grazed to nothing. They just ate it. And as soon as the wolves arrived, though there were very few of them, there were, I think the initial pack was 9 or 10, very small number. They started to have the most remarkable effects, not because they simply killed the elk and deer, they did, but what happened is the elk and deer responded to their presence by radically changing their own behavior. And they took off and went somewhere safer because they didn't want to get caught in valleys and all the places the wolves were, so they left. And they went to other parts of the park. And this is a huge park, so there was plenty of room. Now, as soon as they left, the land they left started to regenerate. And as a matter of fact, the height of the trees in those areas quintupled in 6 years. So it went from nothing to treed. And bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds came. And when they moved in, as a matter of fact, they noticed the songbirds and the migratory birds started a great increase. Then the beavers came, because the beavers like to eat willow and they like to eat all that vegetation, and of course they are engineers of themselves, so they started building their dams. They're ecosystem engineers, they're phenomenal. And that creates a niche for other species. The dams they built became home for otters and muskrats and fish and reptiles and amphibians. And the wolves killed coyotes, which I'm a big fan of. I don't like coyote. Maybe that's awful, I shouldn't say that. And as a result of that, there were more rabbits and mice. And because there was more of them, ravens and bald eagles and fox and badger and hawks came to prey on the rabbits and the mice. And the carrion that the wolves left attracted bears, and they also like to eat the shrubs that have berries, and they also killed some of the calves of the deer, so they reinforced the impact of the wolves. And all of that is pretty easy to understand, but another thing where it's really interesting, because of them, the rivers changed. They started to meander less. How many people have been to Yellowstone? Have you seen those rivers? I mean, the place is just crisscrossed with them. But they were meandering, and then they started meandering less, and there was less erosion. The channels narrowed, pools formed, and all of that was great for wildlife habitat. The rivers changed in the response to the wolves and the things part of this cascade. The forest stabilized, the banks collapsed less often on the stream, and the rivers became more fixed in their course. So by driving out the deer, in some places, vegetation recovering, there was less soil erosion because vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, although they were very small in number, had this huge impact. And it transformed not only the ecosystem, but its physical geography. And there's a whole thing on the internet about how the wolves changed rivers. And those few wolves changed the rivers only by doing what God created them to do. They didn't know they were doing anything special. They just needed to survive. But they went ahead and changed the world in which they lived for the better. There aren't that many people here, but we could do the same thing. We can change the world in which we live. Bob mentioned that we live on a bluff. We do, and I can see Highway 61 from our back porch. We have an unbelievable view. And the highways in the distance, and particularly at night, you can see the cars going north and south and the trucks all lit up. And to watch the lights on the truck is wonderful because it just makes you feel like they're going somewhere special. But they're all doing it individually. They have picked a thing and they have a job to do, and they're doing it an individual destination, and we don't march to the same drummer that the wolves did at all. We choose. We have choices. They didn't. Animals have no choice. My Hummers are gone. Yesterday, the last one left. And I know all about their migration route. It hits a certain time in the year, and they're off. Now I have to wait and see when they're going to come. And I ought to really have written it down, because sometimes they come back on the same day, year after year after year. I didn't know that, but they do. And they are so complicated, but they run to God's timing for animals. With us, He created us, and then He said, here's the world. And we make choices of what we do. He's in control of animals, but He's in charge of us. He gave us free will. Animals don't have that. They have a limited section of things they do, but overall, they all do the same thing. And we have to choose. The cascade effect can be a positive or a negative. And all you need to do is turn on the news. And I don't know about you, but the negativity that has been around, well, it's been longer than COVID, but this COVID is so negative, and it's separated people, it's closed down churches, there's some good benefits from it, I'm sure that there usually is, even in war. But then you have Afghanistan and people dying. And then you have, just constant bath of bad news. I know if it bleeds, it leads. Is that what newspapers said? But what it does is it promotes division, and it also promotes negativity. And Christians are people of the light. And I'll say that to the day I die. We were tasked as a group of people to go out and make new disciples. And you're not going to get anybody to be a Christian by being negative. In this dark world, we are the bulwark. We're the ones to say, I'm going to shine. I'm going to be a light. I'm going to take a stand. And I don't know about you, but this is a time where we all have to really reach down in our heart and decide whether we're for or against, and take a stand on who we are. Remember something. This came to me, and I'm sure you've thought of it 1,000 times. I don't worry about dying my physical body because I'm immortal. I'm a Christian. My body will die, but I won't. I'm promised that. We all have this great life waiting for us. We worry about this one. Will it hurt? All this stuff. But we got to hang on to what we were given, which is eternal life. And that's the message to give to people. Now, some of you may remember Dr. James Kennedy. Does anybody remember James Kennedy? He was on TV. I think he might have been a Presbyterian. I'm quoting him. Tolerance is the last virtue of a depraved society. When you have an immoral society that has blatantly, proudly violated all of the commandments of God, there is one last virtue that they insist on: tolerance for their immorality. These days, if you stand up and say, that's wrong, you're going to get called every name in the book, and you may lose your job. You may, terrible things happen to you because you stand for the values, and the values we have been taught as Christians. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not, all of that. Commit adultery, and it doesn't mean you're some unfeeling idiot because you follow God's laws, or try to at least. And Ephesians says, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. You don't hear too much about the devil these days, do you? Do you believe Satan is real? I do. And I think we're at war with him. For we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, stand. I believe that we're where the Ephesians were, and in a society depicted by Dr. Kennedy. And we are the people of the light. We are the bulwark against that darkness. And it doesn't take a huge number of people. The wolves prove that. All it takes is some committed folks. And Jesus said, go and make disciples. Didn't he? Matter of fact, they're pretty much the last words on earth he said. And he wasn't talking about, well, get together with your friends and go do that. What he said is, you do it. You do it. You do it. If you got to be by yourself, then so be it. It's better if you have somebody, but he didn't say wait until you got a bunch of people that agree with you. Paul didn't. I mean, good Lord, he wound up in jail, and he wouldn't shut up even then. And he took the chance and took a stand for Jesus Christ. And he was a light to many, and as a result of him, we are a church. Because I'm not too sure. I mean, Jesus established the church, but Paul sure spread it around. So we need to go ahead and not be afraid And more it's becoming obvious to me that Christians need to take a stand against these bad things. Because a lot of it is nuts. I mean, I don't know about you, how many times in your family have you heard, "What's the world coming to? Place is just a mess. People don't believe anything anymore. They put up with anything. That's disgusting." You know, how many of you have heard that? Let me see your hands. Have you said it? I'm sure you have. He practically throws things through the TV screen. What a bunch of jerks. You know, how can they do that? Well, we need to have people with their hearts filled with God. Now, Bob did a good job of showing he is everywhere. I mean, God is going, "I'm here," you know, and soon the leaves will all change and we'll have that color to remember when it's snowing. You know, he gives us gifts all the time. And he's just screaming all around us, you know, "Notice me, be mine." He loves us. He wants to take care of us. He wants us to be Jesus on earth. Because Jesus isn't on earth anymore. We are. And nobody asked for the task that he gave us. Is you. Go make disciples. Look at poor Moses. God called him and he said, "Oh, I don't want to do that. You know, pick somebody else. I don't speak well." And he was Moses. And I'm no Moses. And since time began, evil has been. I mean, Cain slew Abel. Terrible wars, holocausts, man's inhumanity to man. And I don't think the days are different. I think we're still in a mess. And the lesson really is a very simple one. As individual Christians, by doing what God created us to do. And what he created us to do is to be ourselves. Quit thinking you need to be Mother Teresa. Quit thinking you need to be some big deal. And start being yourself. And talking to people saying, "This is what Jesus has done for me, and damn the consequences." If people think you're a religious nut, that's fine. At least they'll leave you alone. But you have to make a conscious choice to keep God in the forefront of your mind all the time, and pretty soon you'll find if you practice that and force yourself to make a conscious decision to do that, it will cease being hard and become a habit till it's just like breathing. That everything you see will just scream God. And then you'll find yourself pointing it out to people about the miraculous things he does. And then you'll feel comfortable in telling people about Jesus and what it means to you and how they can have eternal life. That they can feel like I do, that I'm not afraid anymore. They can do what they will to me, down to the point of killing me. So, I'm immortal. And so is every Christian. And aren't we lucky, because the animals aren't? And God will present you with opportunities. And then you'll see, God presented that to me. And then you tell people, God gave us these dogs. And they look and they go, "What?" I said, "Yeah." And you share God's gifts. And not be embarrassed by it. Say, "This is a gift from God. Anyone here with a beautiful singing voice? Then sing. Use your talent. Use the gifts he gives you. Look at the blessings he gives you. And we can choose this. God help the ones that don't. And you don't know how far your touch is going to reach. You don't know. Because, you know, we have found, did I tell them the story about Good Samaritan?
No.
If I did, stop me. Bob and I dress up for different holidays when we bring the dogs to places. And this time it was December, so we were in elf outfits. He was this really tall elf. And they're red and green, you know, we have little booties with bells on and stuff and a cap. And when we go to Good Samaritan, they have a chapel service in this big room. And when they're done with the chapel service, they move over here and form a ring. And then we go talk to them for like an hour or more. And we were waiting because the chapel service wasn't done, and there we're standing in our elf outfits. And these two ladies are there. They're sitting in a bench they had out in front of the room, and I said, just chatting them up, saying, gee, you here to visit somebody? And well, Mama died last week. I said, oh, I'm sorry. I said, that's sad. So why are you here? Well, we want to honor her, and we want to meet your dogs. Okay, you can imagine the question mark. If I had one of those thought balloons, it would have been, huh? I said, our dogs? Yeah. Now get this, as Mama was dying, she said, I hope Odie and Ranger will be okay. And to think that as she's getting ready to meet Jesus, because I knew who it was, because the only one that ever called him Odie was this woman, that she thought about the dogs. That morning I had not wanted to go to Good Samaritan. I wanted to beg off. And that hit me so hard, I stood there and cried to think that she'd remember them as she died. That's pretty big. That's very powerful for me.
Tell them the teddy bear's out.
Oh, and Bob went ahead, and there's a lady in one of the nursing homes who he just loves, and she collects teddy bears, and so does Bob. How many do you have? 110?
12.
112. And so he told her that, and she didn't believe him, and she thought he was making fun of her teddy bears, which he'd never do. He said, okay, well, next time I come, what I'll do is bring you one of my teddy bears, and I'll show you. So we went home, and then we stopped at Farm and Home on the way there to get something, dog food or whatever it was, and actually it was Tractor Supply, to get dog food, and turned around, and on the shelf there were three women. The one he was talking to, then these two said, well, we'd like to see your teddy bear too, because we don't have one. Okay? These 3 teddy bears were on sale for $15. 5, 5, and 5. So naturally we bought them, and they were nice ones, and brought them back, and brought the bear to this woman. And she was in bed at the time, and she tried to get out of bed, and she started crying, and she just went nuts. She thought that was the best thing in the whole wide world, was getting this teddy bear. And soon, her roommate got out of bed and went down and got the activity director, who brought a camera up, is taking a picture of this. And then it cascaded down to the other 2 women, and we gave them their bears. And so there was this whole joy fest going on.
She gave the bear to her.
Yeah, and the one who's since passed away gave it to her special needs nephew, because she said he'd love it.
Cascaded further out that way.
I'm sorry?
Cascaded further down that way.
Oh, well, that, you have no idea. What you did today will affect somebody tomorrow, or a word you drop will wind up saving his life. You just don't know. So always continue on doing good is the whole point about this thing. And you'll never know the outcome of some of this, and your work for God isn't just inside the church, it's every day, everywhere. And what God has planned for you, I have no idea. But whatever it is, say yes. I hate committee work above everything.